The microphone squealed as the slide changed, and I saw my graphs with someone else's name. Applause rose like steam in the Vienna hall, while my advisor smiled into the laser pointer like a saint. The curve I'd coaxed out of stubborn ceramics at 2 a.m. looked back at me from a 30-foot screen, bleached of my initials, polished into a stranger's story. We were at the 16th European Conference on Advanced Materials, June 28, 2024, Austria Center, Vienna, Bruno Kreisky-Platz 1, 1220. Vienna. People wore lanyards like temporary passports. In the second row, a venture partner in a navy blazer tapped notes into a tablet. Next to me, a doctoral candidate from Delft whispered, "Wow, whoever did that modeling is a beast." I said nothing. I watched Professor M, the man who wrote my recommendation letters and corrected my commas, take a breath and say into the mic, "This is the culmination of 2 years of work in my lab at Northbridge Institute of Technology." That's what he called it. His lab, his work. A collective noun that swallowed singular effort whole. 6 months earlier, I joined as a second-year doctoral student with a half-formed obsession. Toughening ultra-high-temperature ceramics for hypersonic leading edges using a graded porosity that could flex instead of shatter. If you can make a material that laughs at 2200 C, you can fly through hell and come out aerodynamic. My name didn't matter then. The equations did. I grew up in Tacoma, studied mechanical engineering at the University of Washington, and arrived in Lisbon for a joint program with Northbridge, Massachusetts, and Instituto Superior Técnico, Portugal, because I wanted to be near ocean air and hard problems at the same time. Professor M, let's keep it at the role, not the person, was a star. Tenured, cited, a Polish-born, Massachusetts-made polymath with a warm laugh and a habit of clasping shoulders like benediction. On my first day, he gave me a tour of Lab 3B in the Materials Building at 45 Quimby Street, Northbridge, MA 02062. Spark plasma sintering rig humming like a cat. Instron 52967 standing like a patient. A muffle furnace that made the air smell like chalk and seconds. We build the useful, he said, tapping the hood, and we publish the helpful. He asked about my modeling experience. I showed him my ABAX scripts. He read 2 lines, nodded and said, "You'll do well here. We're a family." That word should have clanged. Instead, it warmed. Early red flags dressed as compliments. He loved my lab notebook hand-numbered pages, index at the back, date and time stamped, cross-reference to sample IDs etched with a vibro pen. UHTC GP 071, UHTC GP 072. He praised my clean statistics and said, "We'll build the paper around your fracture energy results." Then he suggested adding his senior postdoc, Martin, as co-first author for political reasons. I didn't mind. Teams are real. A week later, he borrowed my laptop for a demo with a visiting provost, asked for my Git password so he could push a note, and never returned the sticky note where I'd written it. He forwarded my slides for a lab meeting and attached a new template, the Northbridge Crest Large, author list, TBD. My stipend came through on time, $2,690 month, taxable. The grant number hung over everything, AFOSR FA 95021100379. U.S. Air Force Office of Scientific Research. I learned how to say no export controls to administrative people and no ITAR to anxious postdocs. I stored my code on a private university GitLab with 2-factor auth. I kept backups on an external drive, locked in a drawer with a little label, "Keep me honest." By March 2024, I had something that felt like progress. An oxide-carbide composite, gradated across 6 mm, sintered at 1950 C for 15 minutes under 30 MPa, then pressureless heat treated at 2100 C to knit pores like an old bruise. It was strong. It flexed like a gymnast and refused to crack like a coward. The fracture energy shot up 37 compared to baseline, a thing of beauty in a field that worships tiny inches. I ran model after model cohesive zone elements, temperature-dependent modulus, microstructure approximated with Voronoi tessellations seeded from the SEM images. I computed J-integrals until my eyes went square. I wrote a draft titled Graded Porosity Enables Toughness in UHTC Composites under Hypersonic Heat Flux with my name first, Martin second, and the advisor last, as is custom for family. Then came the Vienna pitch. "We'll fly you," he said in April. "Present the poster at minimum. Maybe a short talk if we find a slot." He loved the optics of the Lisbon Northbridge co-mentorship and bragged about EU flag emojis. He booked 2 tickets in May. A fact I learned because the departmental assistant CC'd the lab on the travel requisition. The line items read A. Markey, me, and M. Nowak, Martin. Professor M wasn't on the travel form. When I asked, he said, "I'll be in Vienna for a panel anyway. Saves paperwork." 2 weeks before the conference, he asked to clean up my slides on his machine because the new template has sponsor logos. I sent a PAL, PPTX, and a PDF, and he said, "Your graphs sing, let me make them chorale." He returned a version with labels in his favorite font, and my initials replaced with 90 Lab 3B. I put my initials back. He laughed. "Protect your turf," he said, in a tone that tasted like copper. The morning of June 28th, Panel 4, High-Temperature Composites, Austria Center, Hall K. The schedule said 12:15 Adaptive Porosity in UHTC for Hypersonic Environments M. Nowak, Northbridge Institute. Martin glanced at me. He said he'd intro and give the summary, he whispered. "I just have to click." I felt the floor shift. "Why is your name on the program?" I asked. "He said optics," Martin muttered. "You have the poster, I have the talk. Same work, same family." The first slide said, Northbridge Institute of Technology in 48-point pride. The second slide displayed my stress-strain curves. "Our team," the advisor said, "has discovered a tunable porosity gradient that dramatically increases fracture energy." He did not say my name. He gestured toward Martin like a magician's assistant. Martin clicked, eyes fixed on a point above the audience, cheeks the color of printer paper. The venture partner tapped faster. The hall breathed. The laser pointer circled a curve I'd known like my own pulse. Sometimes betrayal doesn't shout. It narrates. He took questions with the ease of a man who'd been practicing answers since grad school. When someone asked about the modeling assumptions, he smiled at me, actually looked right at me and said, "We have a brilliant modeler in the lab." My own name reached my ears like a rumor. He pronounced it wrong. I didn't storm out. I visited the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and counted from 100 to 0 in German, then in Portuguese. Because numbers spoken in other languages can calm storms if you give them their due. At 0, I washed my face, returned, and watched a woman from Bordeaux ask for collaboration. He graciously accepted, no eyes on me. After the talk, I found a quiet bench by a cluster of indoor trees and opened my laptop. I logged into our GitLab and checked the commit history on the repo UHOTCSA GP v3. A new branch had appeared 3 days earlier, Cleanup M. The commits had names like rename figures and merge results, but the real change was in the README. Primary contact, M. Nowak. PI, Professor M. It wasn't huge, it was a seed. I checked my inbox. At 10:42 a.m., while the panel still hummed, an email had arrived from the Office of Technology Commercialization at Northbridge. Invention Disclosure Received ID 24667. Title, Adaptive Porosity in Ultra-High Temperature Ceramics. Named inventors, Professor M. Nowak. No mention of me. I read it twice. A form attached asked for dates of conception and reduction to practice. I had both. March 21st for the key model run, April 7th for the sintered sample, with the behavior that made me cry in a room full of tungsten. I sat there breathing sterile air, the hum of 1,000 conversations vibrating the plants, and knew two things. First, this wasn't accidental. Second, it wasn't going to end in a corridor argument. It would end in documents. The breaking point came later that evening at the conference reception in the glass atrium. People clinked glasses and said polite things about bonded phases. A journalist from a German trade magazine asked the advisor for a quote. He said, "We're months ahead of anyone else," and put a hand on Martin's shoulder like he'd raised him from stone. When the writer asked about the team, he said, "We're small and mighty." The word "we" wrapped the space like scented fog. He did not say my name. "Professor," I said when there was a pocket of calm, a word. He looked delighted, as if I were about to thank him for oxygen. We stepped 2 meters aside, near a potted tree that probably had a Latin name on a tag if you bent down and pretended to tie your shoe. "You filed an invention disclosure," I said, without my name. "Administrative oversight," he said instantly, which is what practiced people call an intentional cut. "We'll fix it Monday." "You told them it was conceived by you and Martin." "I told them what is defensible," he said lower. "You're funded by my grant. You are the lab. Your work is my work, and my job is to move it into the world. Don't be provincial." "I have lab notebook entries," I said. "SM images with my handwriting next to sample IDs. ABAX input files with my name in the header. Emails and calendar invites. You used my commit and my graph. You replaced my initialization with your initials. If you don't amend the disclosure tonight, I'll file a correction myself and go to the ombudsperson. And the agency, if needed." He laughed softly. "You wouldn't want to torpedo your own career," he said. "This is how enemies are made." "This is how careers are made," I said, voice steady. "And this is how they're salvaged." He wiped imaginary dust off his cuff and leaned in the way men lean when they want their breath to be a wall. "You're not first author," he said. "You're not even second. You are a student. Let me handle narrative. Our eyes were at the same level. I saw a man who could be kind and cruel with the same hand. I didn't argue. I said, "Excuse me," and took out my phone. Protagonist reaction, as requested by life, calm, methodical, take back control. At the hotel, I scanned my lab notebook pages with a cam scanner app and saved them as Notebook 0321 4UHTC PDF with page numbers and the coffee stain intact. I exported a zip of my Git repo, including hidden.git directory. I wrote an email to the Office of Technology Commercialization, Correction to Invention Disclosure 24667. I, A. Markey, am a primary inventor. Evidence attached. I CC'd the Ombuds Office, Ombuds Northbridge, EDU, my co-mentor in Lisbon, Professor Joana Rodrigues at Technico, and the grants manager for FA 955 Turn 21 10379. I wrote without adjectives. I wrote in dates and sample IDs. I sent it at 23:47 CET, then closed the laptop and slept like a material that finally found its glass transition. The next morning, my phone vibrated with replies in the brusque cadence of administrators who've been burned before. OTC said, "We will hold disclosure pending review." Ombuds said, "We can meet July 2nd at 10:30 a.m. ET. The grants manager, a man named Tony with a signature that included a bald eagle, wrote, "Please refrain from public dissemination until authorship and inventorship issues are resolved." I smiled into the hotel pillow and respected the eagle. Back in Massachusetts, I began the paperwork ballet. An authorship dispute form, 15 pages, a formal complaint to the research integrity officer, a request for a hold on any patent filings. I documented, printed, notarized. I logged into the building access portal and requested my own badge logs from March and April. They showed me entering Lab 3B at 9:13 p.m. on March 21st and leaving at 1:07 a.m. I retrieved CCTV footage from the hallway, kept for 90 days. An administrator named Kerry God Protect the Kerrys emailed me a link with the subject 3B hallway clip. In the video, I'm a small person in a big hoodie, moving like one more electron. It wasn't art, it was proof. I saved it to an external drive and labeled a folder, Vienna Betrayal, Evidence. I laughed at the name and kept it. Then came escalation. When powerful people feel cornered, they don't always lawyer up right away. Sometimes they linger at your door. He tried charm first. He stopped by my bench as if nothing had happened and placed a coffee next to my keyboard. "We can fix this," he said. "Let me add your name to the patent as an alsos. And we'll put you second on the paper. Fair? Add me as an inventor and first author," I said. "And email OTC yourself, acknowledging that I conceived the graded porosity design on March 21st, 2024, based on my models and sintering schedule, and that Martin ran supporting tests, and that you supervised. Don't write the play for me," he said. I smiled. I already did. Next came rumor. Martin, who had always shared pipettes without a second thought, began avoiding my gaze. A postdoc from Italy asked me at the copy room, "Are you okay? He says you're intense." I wrote the dates and names of these little knives into a log because logs are how you make your own court transcript. The texts from unknown numbers arrived late at night. "You're burning bridges. You'll never get a letter. Don't be naive. This is how it works." I did not reply. I sent screen captures to campus police and received a case number, 2024 CP317. An officer named Wallace called to say, "We can't trace easily without a subpoena, document and block. If it escalates physically, call us." It did, briefly. July 7th, 8:12 p.m., I left the lab and saw him standing by the front of 45 Quimby Street, hands in pockets, ostentatiously not waiting. When I passed, he said, "You think Lisbon will save you? They rely on our funding." I said lightly, "The ocean carries more than one ship." He smiled and said, "You're very quotable." I wrote it down later as if it mattered. Aftermath, receipts, bank accounts, contracts. I pulled the travel requisition forms and saw that the Vienna flights had been paid with a corporate card tied to the lab's discretionary account, not the AFOSR grant. The card statements revealed a working dinner at Café Central, 50 a year, a poster print, 84 a year, and an informal team event at a wine bar, 120 a year. Nothing shady there, but on June 26th, a hotel room change appears. 2 rooms merged into a suite. Who authorized the upgrade? The assistant wrote, "Professor M called it in. Said he had a panel and needed space to host a colleague." I highlighted the line, "I'm not petty, but patterns are the story." On July 2nd, the Ombuds meeting happened in a small office on the second floor of the administrative building, 12 Ashmont Street. The Ombuds, a calm woman in a navy cardigan who looked like she'd birthed half the policies on campus, asked me to walk through a timeline. I spoke in verbs and dates. She listened, asked for copies of lab notebooks. I brought certified scans, and suggested an authorship mediation before formal research misconduct proceedings. Misconduct requires fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism, she said. Inventorship disputes are different, but they rhyme. I nodded. Plagiarism of context, I said. She allowed herself a corner smile. The mediation was scheduled for July 17th, room 214, Materials Building. Present, me, the advisor, Martin, ombuds, an associate dean, and a recorder. The associate dean began with values statements that smelled like vanilla. Then she asked the advisor to outline contributions. He made it a sermon. I conceived of graded porosity as a path years ago. I stewarded resources. I mentored. I made introductions. Ms. Markey, he gestured, provided some modeling that supported our direction. I laid out the evidence like setting out tools. Lab notebook pages 032124, 04so7224. A printed Git log with my username a.markey and commit hashes 7F3A9D1C2B7E. The hallway clip, SEM images with my handwriting, the calendar invites titled Hypersonic Sinter 2 AM. I included an email he'd sent on April 8th with the phrase, "Your idea has legs." I kept my voice level. Then I set my boundary. Inventorship must reflect actual conception. Authorship must reflect actual drafting and analysis. I want my name as primary inventor on the disclosure, my name first on the manuscript, and a formal letter acknowledging my contribution for my file. Silence has weight. The ombuds looked at the advisor and said, "I recommend amending the disclosure and paper authorship accordingly." The associate dean added, "We'll have the Office of Research Integrity review." The advisor, who had been performing benevolence, let his jaw muscle twitch. "I cannot run a lab if every contribution is weaponized," he said. "We are a team." "You can't run a lab by erasing your team," I said. He signed the amendment. He scrawled like a man holding a dull knife. He did not look at me when the recorder asked him to initial page 3. I thought that might be the end. It wasn't. People who lose publicly often go private. A week later, someone from a blocked number sent a photo of me in Lab 3B, taken through the glass from the hallway. The caption, "Careful, cameras watch both ways." I forwarded it to Officer Wallace, who said, "We'll increase patrols." I asked the building manager to check access logs around the timestamp. A keycard belonging to Martin had pinged the door. When I confronted him gently in the break room, he shook his head, eyes wet. "He asked me to check who was around," he said. "He said you were going to steal data." "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I believed him. I told him to write down the date and note it for himself because one day he'd need his own log. Positive turn. It arrived in an email from Lisbon. Professor Joana Rodrigues forwarded a note from a materials group at the University of Porto. They'd seen the Vienna talk, my work with someone else's face, and invited me to give a seminar by name on August 22, 2024, Department of Mechanical Engineering, FEUPA Rua Dr. Roberto Frias, 4200 465 Porto. Honorarium, 250 EUR, coffee after. It wasn't money, it was a door. Joanna also CC'd a friend at a small aerospace startup in Aveiro, Atlantico Aero Materials, who was looking for a summer consultant to model thermal shock in ceramic matrix composites. Rate, 35 EUR, up to 60 hours. I said yes. I felt my spine again. Another ally emerged closer to home, a patent attorney named Sonia Patel, a Northbridge alum who volunteered with a grad student advocacy group. She reviewed the amended disclosure, suggested language to cement my inventorship, conception of the claimed graded porosity architecture and its parameters, and taught me the difference between authorship, ethics, and inventorship, law. She also showed me how to archive everything off campus without violating policy, print to PDF, hash the files with SHA 256, email the hash to myself and her. "Hashes are timestamps you can hold in your palm," she said. "Judges like them." On August 15th, the Office of Research Integrity issued a letter with a header that always makes hearts stutter. Finding, no research misconduct. Rationale, no fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in the production of data. Ancillary finding, authorship dispute resolved in favor of A. Markey for first authorship on the manuscript, graded porosity enables toughness. Inventorship on disclosure, 246067, amended to include A. Markey as co-inventor. Recommendation, remedial mentoring for Professor M regarding authorship norms, lab-level training, no further action. It was bureaucratic grace. It was also a warning like a parking ticket. I took what was mine and moved forward. The paper submitted on September 3rd to Journal of the European Ceramic Society listed A. Markey, Northbridge, Lisbon, M. Nowak, Northbridge, J. Rodrigues, Lisbon, Professor M. Northbridge, last. I wrote the cover letter and didn't mention Vienna. I included the raw data in a public repository with a DOI. I slept 7 hours that night and woke to my own breath instead of someone else's. He didn't congratulate me. He started CCing me on emails he sent to people whispering about lab culture. He posted on LinkedIn about ownership versus stewardship and the danger of individualism in team science. I didn't care. My logs sat in a folder, my stipend hit my account. My Avero side work funded a weekend trip to Nazaré, where I stood by waves bigger than grudges and let the Atlantic rewrite my heartbeat. The last escalation came like a last mosquito. September 18th, 10:22 p.m., I left the lab with a USB stick in my pocket that held 2 years of life, the final plots for revisions. He was there again by the front, backlit by the fluorescent glow that makes everyone look like their worst choices. "You think this is a victory," he said, voice low. "You will need me. Let us close doors or open them. Remember who taught you where the doors are." I thought of Joanna, of Sonia, of the email from Porto, of the kid from Delft who had whispered, "Wow." "I remember who showed me where the exits are," I said, and walked to my bike. He didn't follow. He let the door hiss closed like a tired sigh. I wish the ending were a trumpet. It wasn't. It was a ribbon of small good things. The seminar in Porto went well. After the talk, a professor with oil on his hands from a morning in the workshop said, "You did not bury the leady, and I appreciate that." The startup in Aviro extended my contract for another 40 hours. I sent an invoice for 1,400 a year, and the payment hit my Millennium bank account 4 days later. I made a spreadsheet titled Ceramic Money, Human Joy, because naming things helps. On October 12th, an email from the journal, "Your manuscript has been accepted pending minor revisions." The reviewer who mattered wrote, "The novelty is in the graded porosity architecture and its robust modeling." I printed the line and taped it above my desk like a milder lighthouse. Martin knocked on my office door a week after acceptance with a 6-pack of seltzer and a face that had decided to choose. "I'm applying out," he said. "If they ask why, I'm going to say I want a lab where ideas have names." He hesitated. "Can I list you as a mentor?" I surprised myself by smiling. "Yes," I said, "but only if you keep good notebooks." On November 4th, the Office of Technology Commercialization emailed, "Provisional patent application filed, US app. Number 63, named inventors, A. Markey, Professor M. Nowak." I sat for a long minute. I imagined the curve on that first slide and how it had felt to see it with someone else's name. Then I looked at the string of digits that would outlive gossip and smiled the tired smile of a person who has made a dent where it counts. In the paperwork that governs memory. He didn't stop existing. He wrote a grant and got it. He gave a keynote and filled a room. He learned to say my name correctly when asked. He also learned that somebody in his lab kept hashes. Time did a small kindness. June 28, 2025, a year to the day, I returned to the Austria Center Vienna, this time as a scheduled speaker with my name in the program. 1215 graded porosity and the ethics of credit in rapid materials innovation A. Markey. People laughed when I mentioned lab culture. People nodded when I showed policy slides. People took photos of the curve. A venture partner in Navy took notes and, during QA, asked about commercialization pathways. "They start with clarity," I said, "and they continue with contracts." I ended with a mirror. I clicked to the first slide, my slide, and let the mic squeal a little as I leaned in, eyes tracing the curve that started this small war. "Here is the same graph," I said, "with its name fixed. Not because the molecule changed, but because the people did." The applause rose like steam again, but this time it felt like heat you earn, not fog you endure. Walking out, I passed a potted tree that did have a Latin name on a tag if you cared to look. I bent and read it. Ficus benjamina. It forgives a lot. I straightened, felt my phone buzz, and glanced down. A text from Joanna. "Proud of you." A text from Sonia. "Protect your hashes." A text from an unknown number. Nothing. The silence had finally learned how to be quiet. On the way to the U-Bahn, a journalist stopped me. "Can I ask a last question?" he said in accented English. "If you could write a message on the first slide for your past self, what would it be?" I looked back at the glass doors, at the lobby where I had learned how to count in 2 languages to keep from screaming. "Count to 0, I said, "then write it down." At the station, the train arrived with a rush of air that made loose papers flutter like startled birds. As the doors closed, a microphone somewhere in the hall squealed for a second and cut. I smiled. The curve held, the name held, and that sound, the little feedback that begins a story, faded into a city that had watched me learn to be my own steward.